Welcome back. In this video we're gonna show you how to install OBS Studio, how to configure all the settings for each main encoder you may use for recording your screen, and this is the first step throughout the whole process of recording, editing and rendering your videos. So in this first step, we're gonna use some encoders. You may choose from a lot of possible encoders available by OBS Studio. And with this encoder, the captured video will be encoded into the format you choose. And you gotta choose, obviously, a format and also the right settings for achieving the best video quality, the best compression, as well as the smallest size of the captured video. In our case, we're gonna capture it from the screen, but of course you may choose any other source for your videos. So if you don't have OBS Studio installed in your PC, and if you're running Linux, you just go to the store and search for OBS. Here it is, OBS Studio, OBS free and open source software for live streaming and screen recording. And in this case it's an official build, but a very stable and complete one. If you run in Windows or iOS, there's also the build for these other operational systems. But in my case, I'm using Linux, but it's kind of the same process. You go to the store of Windows or of iOS and you search for OBS, and there will be a version for that other OS. So in our case, we are using Linux Ubuntu 20.04, and I have already installed OBS Studio, but there's nothing special. In order to install, just click and ask for installation. Before you install OBS and run it, please first check if your NVIDIA card is installed. In my case, I'm running Linux. So when you install Linux and you ask to add third-party drivers during the installation, Ubuntu already installs the NVIDIA X server settings. It's a server for all the configurations and drivers for NVIDIA, as well as to Intel integrated graphics card. So in my case, I have, if you go here to Prime Profiles, I have both NVIDIA Graphics Card installed as well as Intel integrated graphics also installed. Of course, we're gonna use the NVIDIA card during our process. And just make sure that you have set the active graphics card as NVIDIA. You may choose this NVIDIA On Demand at the Prime Profiles of NVIDIA X Server Settings, or in case you want, you can choose also this other one, but I prefer to keep selected this On Demand NVIDIA option. And every time that I want to run any process on NVIDIA, I just click the right button and select Launch using dedicated graphics card. So it will open that process of that software that I'm using on NVIDIA card. But despite where you open the software, either OBS or Audacity or Kdenlive, when you ask for the software to make the encoding or the rendering, if you use the right encoder, which are the NVENC encoders, either H.264 or H.265, it will always use the NVIDIA Graphics Card, so it won't matter what selection you do here. But just for also run the softwares on NVIDIA card, I like to keep selected here the NVIDIA On Demand option at the NVIDIA X server settings. So I have already opened OBS Studio on my RTX 2060 graphics card because I'm already recording this lecture right now. So you can open it. In here, after you open, the first thing you gotta set here is a source for the video and audio input stream. That's what you're gonna capture. And in my case, I have selected the screen capture source. That's the one you gotta set if you want to record your screen, your whole screen. Although you have many other options here. For capturing only the audio or your browser, to capture from a certain video capture device, and so on. But the only source we're gonna use during this course is the screen capture source. So you just add that. In my case, I have already added. And as soon as you add, you're gonna start seeing at this window here the real-time preview of what you're able to record as soon as you click on the start recording option here. In my case, it's not appearing because I have already clicked on it, but in your case it will be available an option here, start recording. But before you start recording, what's appearing here at the window preview, you first gotta set the settings by clicking on settings. Let's go step by step along all the tabs here. Here on the first tab, you don't have to change anything. It's only some customizations, but we don't need to change that. The second tab here is only for streaming. That's not our case. We are just gonna record our screen. We are not gonna stream or make any live streaming or such. And before you go to the output here, go already to this advanced tab here to change the video color settings. And in your case, the fields will be active. In my case, it's not because I'm recording. And the color format, just leave the NV12. You can select some more advanced color formats, but it will increase a lot the complexity of the graphics. So the recommendations of YouTube or other streaming platforms are the NV12. So let's keep that. Here at the color space, you have the 609 and 709. Please select the 709. It's a better color space and it won't increase much the complexity of the frames. And here at the color range, you may switch to full, and that's all you gotta set here at this section, advanced. Here at the hotkeys, these are only shortcuts for your keyboard. For example, here I've selected Alt plus S for start recording and Alt P for pausing and unpausing recording. You may set any other shortcut you want. And next, go here to the video, where you can set the base resolution of what you're capturing. For example, if you're capturing a 4K streaming from your video camera, you may set here by just clicking here. If your field is active, just click on it and set the 4K resolution. But in our case, as my screen is 1K, I will leave the default here as 1K as the base resolution. And here the output scaled resolution is the resulting resolution for the recording. that you're making. And this is basically in case you wanna make a stream with a lower resolution. For example, if you wanna downscale that original base 1K resolution for 720 per 480 pixels. But it's not our case. We're not making a stream in here. We are just recording the screen so we can leave the best resolution, which is the base 1K resolution that we are capturing. Here is the downscale filter. If you wanna make any downscale here, you should set this Lanczos sharpened scale 36 samples, which is the best downscale filter for you to have the best results. Although in our case it also won't change anything because we are not downscaling anything here. And one thing very important is the FPS value. If you select here when your field is active, you see that you have some options. You can choose the 30 or 60 standard options, or you can select this integer FPS value for setting any integer number for your FPS. In our case, we are not using 120, although we could, but we'll set here 60 frames per second, which is pretty nice for nowadays videos. If you're making a live streaming, for example, you should leave as 30, but in our case, again, we are doing a recording and we want to leave a good quality image and a smooth video, so we'll set 60 frames per second for our 1K resolution. The next tab you can set is the audio. Please check if the sample rate is 48 kHz and if the channels are set as stereo. Here you gotta set the desktop audio capture. You can just leave the default, and the mic audio set, which also you can leave as default. So in our case, both the desktop audio as the mic audio, which is in this case my voice that I'm recording on this mic, both will be captured along with the video we are recording, or that you're gonna be recording when you try to make your own screen recordings. Let's just check here at the configurations of Ubuntu if my input devices are working. So if you go here at the configurations, sound, you have at the volume levels the system sounds. If you want to record your system sounds on your screen capture, you gotta turn on the system sounds here. And here mainly the input recording source will be my mic that I'm speaking to right now, which is your input device, and you also may set here the volume you want. I've set the maximum here, but you may adjust the way you want. So just check if the sound here is recording and if the system sounds are also leveled up. And the next and most complex configurations we gotta set is on the output tab. That's why I left it as the last configuration. Here at the output settings, you have the settings for the streaming. We are not making any streaming, but in case you wanna do, you gotta set the encoder and the scale and the rate control, the bit rate, the keyframe interval, the preset and profile quality settings, the max B frames here. But as I said, we're not making any streaming, so I go directly to the recording settings, which is very similar to the settings here. First, let's go to the audio. Please set as the output bitrate for every sound track the 320 bit rate. In our case, we're just gonna use the first track, but if you wanna add other tracks to your capturing, they will already be set as 320 bit rate for the audio. And next, go to the recording tab, but first select here the advanced output mode for you to have more options. And at the recording tab, now we're gonna set the most important configurations of our recording, which is gonna be, if you also select here the type custom output FFmpeg, which is gonna be all these options here. In case you wanna use only the standard output configuration, you have simpler settings to select, but I wanna show you how to make the most complete configuration. So select the custom output FFmpeg in order to have all these options to manually define their values. So here at the FFmpeg output type, it just shows that you want to output to a file. As we are just recording the screen, we are outputting that recorded video screen to a file. You could also output to a URL, but it's not our case. We're not making any streaming. So select here output to file. Next, select the file path or the URL. In our case, it's the file path that I have already set to my home videos. You can just open here and choose any folder you want, home, videos, and click choose. I have already chosen, so I'll just leave it as it is. Here is an important configuration, which is the container format. As we've already said, there are a lot of containers which you can select from, all previously available at OBS Studio, which uses the FFmpeg and libraries available. So if you select here container format, you can choose from a lot of containers. The first one we are gonna select is the MP4 container, because we wanna use the encoders from NVIDIA for showing you how to make use of your graphics card. So we gotta select the MP4 container format. Here is the name, complete name of the container, MP4 MPEG 4 part 14. This is the latest version of that container. Here is the mixer settings. We are not gonna set anything on that. Here is the video bit rate, which is important for the video quality, but in all recent encoders, you don't set the video bit rate manually, not the average nor the max or min bit rate, because that's only necessary when you're making some streaming and when you have to set a maximum bit rate for your streaming, and it's not the case here. Here we can have any bit rate as long as the quality of our video keeps constant, and that's what we're going to select here, a constant quality for whatever bitrate the encoder decides to use for each frame. So of course, in a video we'll have hundreds or thousands of frames, and for each frame, depending on the picture of that frame, the encoder will use a different bitrate, but keeping the quality. We're going to set here down below, and it's wise to let the encoder decide which bitrate to use for that quality we set. So there are a lot of scenarios which you might be using OBS or screen recording. For example, for live streaming or for sending the video for a specific streaming setting in which you would have some limitations on the bandwidth of the internet for your clients. But in our case, again, we are just showing you how to record a screen. So we don't have to set any specific average or maximum bitrate here. So we let the 0 number, which means automatic, and for that the encoder will be responsible for setting the best bitrate for each frame as long as the quality is achieved. The keyframe interval, not in seconds but in frames, we can set here. If you look for what it means, you see that it's the frame that has all the pixels of the image. I'll leave some references about graphics theory on this video. If you look for it, you see that the keyframe is the frame among all the frames in which all the pixels of the image are present. And on the other two kinds of frames, only the changes on the images are present. The keyframes are the most complete frames, which have all the pixels for that image, and there's a interval setting with which this keyframe appears along your timeline. So for example, you can set that for every 2 seconds, that's the standard, for every 2 seconds you gotta have a keyframe with all the bits and all the pixels of the image. It's a complete frame. So each and every 2 seconds a keyframe will be generated with all image information. And in our case, as we are using 60 frames per second, and if we want to set for every 2 seconds the keyframe to be generated, so we would have to set here a keyframe for every 120 frames, and that would be equivalent to setting a 2 second interval for that keyframe. Please take in account that here the setting is based on the frames, not on the seconds. If it were based on seconds, we would just put 2 seconds here. But as it's based on the frames, and we have 60 frames each second, so for 2 seconds interval, we should put here 120. But again, I'll just leave the default, the automatic, for the encoder to set this keyframe by default. And also remember that if you wanna customly set this keyframe interval, you gotta change it if you change the FPS. For example, if you change the FPS to 120, then you would have 120 frames per second and not every 2 seconds. So you would have to set here for 2 seconds interval 240 frames if you had set the FPS to 120. But in our case, as it's 60 frames per second, then the value here would be 120, but we again will let the automatic setting for the encoder to set the default. Here is the rescale output. If you wanna rescale your recording, you may keep that in 1K in our case. Here is the other very important part of the configuration setting, which is the video encoder. Have in mind that here we've selected the container format, in our case the MP4, but that container MP4 will have many encoders and decoders into its list of options for you to select. So after you select the container, you have also to select the encoder itself, which is what is going to compress and decompress your video or your frames according to the settings we'll be setting right next. So here are all the encoders from the MP4 container, and you may choose any of them. In our case, we're gonna select the NVIDIA encoder HEVC, or high efficiency video coding. Every time that you have the NVENC or NVIDIA encoder abbreviation at the encoder name, it's guaranteed that that encoder is a hardware-based encoder, so it will make use of your NVIDIA graphics card. And for example, if we choose here the HEVC NVENC, it's the same as H.265, which is the same as HEVC. And the NVENC here guarantees that this encoder will run on the NVIDIA graphics card as we want. So if you choose another H.265 or H.264 encoder that doesn't have the NVENC name, for example here the H.264 VAAP, it will not run on the NVIDIA graphics card. So please choose an encoder that has the NVENC word. And in our case, as we want the H.265, please select this HEVC, which is a synonym for H.265. If otherwise you wanted to select the H.264, this would be the option H.264-NVENC. But in our case, let's choose this one, HEVC-NVENC, which is the same for NVENC-HEVC. So just select it. Then comes the control part of the quality of our video, which is the video encoder settings. In here we have some options of parameters to use for this encoder. Every encoder will have some implemented attributes or parameters. It's not useful to set any parameter that's not on the encoder documentation, so you gotta see before you set any parameter here if that parameter is implemented by that encoder present at that container. So in this first example, I have already checked that the suitable parameters for setting the quality for the encoding for HEVC-NVENC are these ones. So the rate control parameter, we are setting the variable bit rate, as we don't have to use any constant bit rate, which would make the encoding very inefficient in our case. And there are very few scenarios where you would want to use the constant bit rate. So generally, the rate control you're gonna use is the variable bit rate, and we can choose this VBR-HQ. And other than the rate control parameter, we gotta set some constant quality parameter. In the case of this encoder, the best parameter to be set is the CQ, constant quality, which you can set from a scale that goes from 1 to 51. And the greater the number here you set at the constant quality, the greater will be the compression, which means that The greater the number here is set at the constant quality, the greater will be the compression, and the worst will be the result, the bitrate result of your output video. So the worst will be the quality. So you gotta find an average number here so that you can have some level of compression that does not affect the final quality that we wanna achieve. So a good number to set here is 30. It has a good compression. It will produce a good level of an average bitrate for the video, and it will not have any perceivable diminution on the video quality or the quality of the frames. So you see that if you choose, for example, 15 here, it will compress too little and you get very high bit rate for your video, which is not good because it will also lead to a very high sized file. So you can augment your compression to 30, for example, and you see that the quality will keep a good quality. You will not perceive any diminution on the image quality, and you get a good bitrate for archiving your video, for example. Although if you were making a live stream, for example, you would have to compress even more for having much lower bit rates. So it's kind of a test and check process. Before you record your whole video, for example 1 hour video, you should first select and test the parameter values here with a shorter video and see if the quality keeps constant and adequate for your needs, and also the bitrate and the file size, calculating the size that the whole recording will take based on that first sample you've tried. So other than the constant quality as 30, which is the average quality, you can set the minimum quality and the max quality, Q min and Q max. And basically that's for leaving some space for the encoder to adjust, diminish or increase a little bit the quality from that average quality you've set. So this is a good configuration setting that you can use for most of your needs, mainly for archiving, for example, a screen recording video for backup or such. Okay, so for this encoder, that's pretty sufficient for a constant quality, and based on this configuration it will adjust the bitrate automatically as well as the keyframe interval. Next, the audio bitrate. Always set the standard 384 kilobits per second. That's the advised bitrate for the audio at platforms as YouTube, so it doesn't increase the size of the file much differently from the video. So you just set the maximum advisable bitrate for the audio here, which is 384 kilobits per second. Next, you can choose the number of audio tracks here. We just leave as 1. In here also important, the audio encoder will leave the default, which is AAC, but you could change that for any other available encoder as Vorbis or Opus, both open source from Google, or you could set the FLAC one, which is the lossless encoder for the audio, but it would lead to a very increase on the file size and the lossless encoders, both the audio lossless encoder as the video lossless encoder, are only for specific contexts, as for museums or any other very specialized archiving services. You don't need to use the lossless encoders, neither for the audio nor for the video. So in our case, we'll just leave the default, which is AAC. And we don't have to set any audio settings, so that would be everything we had to select or set for start capturing our record. Then you just click OK. And finally, after setting all the configurations, you can just press start recording. And in our case, it's not appearing here as I'm already making a record. But in your case, you would just press the start recording button here, or you could minimize this OBS graphical interface and work only with the top bar icon menu, pressing the start recording option here. So I'll just stop this video and start a new one so that I can show you this recorded screen video in terms of the properties of the file, the bitrate, and the size of this video. So see you in a moment.